Hello, this is Angelia, and you are listening to or watching the podcast, Why You Do What You Do. The podcast that talks about human development and psychology to help you maybe figure out a little bit more about why you do what you do. And today we're talking about lifestyle and social issues related to aging. We've been on this topic of aging for a little while, and it's unique to everyone. You know, everybody is different, so what's right for one old person, you know, might not be right for another older person. So, again, one size does not fit all when it comes to aging. I will never retire, wrote the comedian George Burns at age 87. And most of us who are, you know, older now, we remember George Burns. If you younger folks don't, you can, you know, always Google him and check it out. George and Gracie, you know, they had shows on the radio and on television, you know, some vaudeville stuff. Oh God was, you know, probably the one that my generation's more familiar with in the 70s and 80s, you know, where he played God. They kind of lost me on Oh God, You Devil, but, you know, the Oh God movies I thought were pretty good with John Denver. So, you know, he's someone who was 87 years old and is like, I'm never going to retire. So some people are like that. Some people want to work that long and be doing stuff when they're that old. Other people are like, heck no, as soon as I can retire, I'm going to retire. So everyone's different. Burns, who continued performing until 2 years before his death at the age of 100, was one of many late life achievers who have kept their minds and bodies active doing the work that they love. And there's a lot of folks in that category. And, you know, if that's what you want to do, is to stay active and keep doing the work that you love, then by all means go for it. Don't let anybody talk you into you have to retire or you have to stop or whatever. You know, we talked yesterday about optimization and compensation. If you can't do things one way, find another way to do it. You know, you can always compensate for what you're losing, whether it be your mind, body, or whatever. You know, I know some people who lose their mind, but I've done lost my body, so I can't talk too much. But anyway, you know, but if you're not in love with the work you do, and a lot of people aren't, like people had to take a job, you know, to pay for stuff, a 9 to 5 it, and they can't wait. You know, my husband's chomping at the bit now to get out the door, you know, because he says it's too physical job and it's wearing him out. But, you know, he still stays. And even though I've said we can get you a desk job, we can, you know, the doctor can, So, I think he's Brer Rabbiting it a little bit. He's complaining about it a little more than, you know, it is. But, you know. He's still ready to retire. He talks about it a lot. Whether and when to retire are among the most crucial lifestyle decisions people make as they approach late adulthood. And, you know, that's because when you're getting into late adulthood, like I say, the brain's not what it used to be, the body's not what it used to be, and you start to feel that. You start to feel a little bit like you're kind of dragging yourself around. But some people, they are, you know, into something where it doesn't have to be the end of what they do, like for George Burns. Excuse me. And it's like I said, my dad's still pretty sharp, you know, 84 years old. He's still sharp, you know, he can sit there on the Jeopardy and answer most all those questions. Now, one of the newer ones, he can't answer some of the newer ones because they are after his time, you know. Like I said, there's some I can't answer that my kids can answer. You know, one of my oldest sons kind of watches with us, and he's like, "Oh, that's so." And I'm like, I had no idea, because you know what came before you and during your heyday, but what came after for your children's generations, you might not necessarily know about or even care about. Honestly, like some of their music, and I was listening as they were growing up, and I'm like, yeah, no, not for me. That's what you like, but not for me. So, you know, when you get into late adulthood, you might think about, do I want to stay doing something? Do I not want to do something? I know a person who, they didn't want to do anything, sit down, that's it. And that's what they're doing. If that makes them happy, go for it. I personally, will probably never be that person. I like doing things. I enjoy doing things. Like I said, I am going to stop teaching probably when I turn 60. Get a few more years in, kind of teach people the things I've had to learn and wanted to learn. Because, like I say, I wanted to keep coaching and teaching, but I just couldn't do it anymore. So I still want to get that information to people who might want that information. So, this is my way of teaching without going down to the classroom and doing it. So, and like I said, if you want to throw something my way on Patreon, I'm okay with that. I'm sitting here teaching you for free, If you're learning something, maybe you might want to throw your little teacher or something. That's all I'm saying. Because I would mind. I had to pay for my education. That's all I'm saying. These decisions affect their financial situation and emotional state. And of course it does. If you take early retirement, you might not get as much money as if you wait. Now, a woman in my family, she went ahead and retired at, 62. Took her Social Security because she said, I don't know how much longer I got. And she barely made it past 65 before she passed away. And so she probably made the right choice for her. But we never know. And like my husband, he wants to wait till he's going to get his full, Social Security. Soon we still have that when he retires. Thanks for our, great administration we have in office now. We're just praying that we still have that, because otherwise we're screwed. As most people I think would be who aren't, independently wealthy. Everybody's situation is different. If you can afford to take early retirement, you might want to, so you can do what you want to do in life. If you can't, you might want to hold out a little longer, rather than be, in a financial situation where you might have to depend on your children, and we don't want to do that for sure. I hope nobody would want to do that. I know people that are like that, and there's other cultures where, there's a certain cutoff age, and like, okay, I'm staying home now, you support me. And the family all lives together in the same house. So, it's what you're used to, it's what you feel is the right thing to do. So, and it does affect your emotional state, because some people get depressed when they retire. They feel isolated, they miss that work. And when they do that, they can always go volunteer. They can always go out and talk to their neighbors or whatever. Go to, breakfast. McDonald's has a breakfast for, seniors. Different places have walking for seniors. Senior shopping times. Get out there. If you miss work and miss socializing, get out there and socialize, But if you couldn't wait to get out of work so you could sit home alone, then that's what you're going to do. And your emotional state's probably not going to suffer from that. But sometimes people get into their heads. I know someone who's kind of not seen anybody for several weeks now, except for one person. And, we're probably going to go check on them, because we're like, that's not normal. And the last time this happened, they end up getting weak and, falling and being in rehab. So we're going to go check on them, surprise inspection. But, we feel like that's what we need to do because we care about this person. So, we don't want to let them sit there and, get all depressed and fall apart, because, that's not good. As well as the ways they spend their waking hours. So again, what you want to do. Once you retire, your life is your own. You do what you want to do. And if that's being active, go do it. If it's not, then sit. But, just realize if you sit, that's going to take a toll on your body too. And the ways they relate to family and friends. Now, I know my mom retired early, and it wasn't too, long after that where, she took an interest in me for probably the first time in my life. And I was like, I was wary. So, we started she wanted to know my truth of what happened to me growing up, because I had come out and told that. And there were people who didn't believe me and said nasty, mean things about me. And so she took me out for lunch, and she said, I want to know. I want to know everything. And so I told her, and come to find out, she had some similar things happen to her. And so we bonded over our shared trauma, unfortunately. But, for the last 5 years of her life, we were best friends. We went out together. We went shopping together. We went to lunch together. We did pretty much everything that she did together. And I'm glad to have that, because there are some people who never have a relationship with their mother. I know people who just never did. They left home. Mom went their way and didn't. There was this one woman I know. Her mother was a male stripper groupie. She followed around Jeremiah and them folks. And once her kids were grown, the daughter said she really didn't pay them any attention. She had different boyfriends. She remembers a lot of times them being at home alone. They would fix peanut butter sandwiches for supper. Sometimes they didn't have a lot going on there. So once she left home, there was no contact. They just, nope, we're done. And unfortunately, that's how some people's life is. They never have a relationship with their parents. So, I do feel blessed that I got to have that, because honestly, I never thought I would. And, older people sometimes withdraw. They don't want to be a burden. Like say the person we're going to go talk to, that's how they feel. They don't want to be a burden because they know there's another person in our life who is a burden. But they're not like that person at all. They're not demanding of, our time and attention when they don't need it. They just want this other person I'm talking about wants just someone to fawn over them all the time, and serve them like, they really wish they had slaves, honestly. But the other person is not a problem. It's like if we're going to the store anyway, might as well go for you. If we're coming out to get something to eat anyway, we might as well stop by and see you, help you do some laundry while we're watching TV. Not a big deal at all. But I think they kind of feel like maybe, they're getting to be a burden, but they're not at all, because we actually, my husband said he enjoys going over there and talking to him. My oldest son enjoys going over there, even though my oldest son is, mentally disabled, and he's got ADD, not ADHD. He's not hyper at all. He's just, he's not there. But he is on his phone all the time, and he can do that and watch TV and talk to you at the same time. He's one of those multitasking people that his brain is wired so that he can actually do a bunch of things at the same time. I'm not like that. I'm a one-track train. I'm not doing a bunch of different things. But he can sit there and he can do that. And, this person doesn't like when he does that because he thinks he's ignoring him. But really, he's not. He's listening, and he'll interject in the conversation when anything comes up that he feels like he has something to add to. But, excuse me. Sometimes older folks do withdraw a little bit. So if you got some older folks you haven't heard from a while, check on them, talk to them, make sure they're doing okay, because sometimes they don't want to tell you if they're not. And some people keep up with their friends. They want to talk to their friends, and some people don't. Some people feel like, I knew a woman who, we worked together. And I didn't think that me not working there anymore negated the friendship. And so I called her up. She goes, we don't work together anymore. We don't have anything in common. I don't feel like we should be friends. I'm like, well, okay then. And then I knew another woman who did the exact opposite of that. She decided she only wanted to be friends with her work friends. She didn't want any of her, friends. We were in school together, grew up together. She didn't want any of her friends from then. And then she ended up not working at that place anymore. And she called us back and was like, oh yeah, I was a jerk. I shouldn't have done that. I shouldn't have tried to cut people out of my life that I've known all my life for these people that I worked with. And, but that's just what I felt like I had to do. And I'm like, okay, because I don't know why you would feel like you have to do that. But, some older people want to keep friends, some don't. Some want to just let go, and that's okay if that's what you want. But don't isolate yourself just because you think I'm old, useless, whatever, because like I said, some people sit there and they get depressed. The problem of providing financial support for large numbers of retired older people also has serious implications for society. And it does, like they talk about our Social Security system. Well, it's been mismanaged for several administrations now, in my opinion. So there might be a problem. But if we quit putting money in dumb stuff, maybe we would have money for Social Security. I'm kind of a moderate person. I'm not really liberal. I'm not really conservative. And I don't like extremists or either of those ends, because I know what I know. And I know being, stingy, mean, oppressing the poor is not good for society. And I also know that doing things that are not right, like allowing children to have sex changes, because children are children, they don't know their own mind yet, and if they're not sexual beings yet, not fully matured, they don't know what sex they want to be yet. So, and psychology teaches you that. So, I'm not down with that either. So, I'm in the middle, where most people probably are, and then we gotta suffer through these two extremes, fighting it out with each other. And it's like, guys, I feel like I ain't gonna say it, but anyway, society would be better, if there weren't so many obligations that the government felt like it needed to pay for. So, again, a lot of people pulling on the Social Security system can be a drain, especially right now. Especially as the baby boomer generation is entering old age. Because, as we know, that's why they call them the baby boomers, because there was a lot of them born after World War II, to, I think, the end year on that is 64, because I think my husband's a boomer, but I'm a Gen X. So, a lot of folks were born. So, all these folks are going to get on Social Security, if they're not already. And that's going to be a pull on the system. But, like I said, it's been mismanaged for the past several administrations, in my opinion. If we can get, people's hands out of the cookie jar, and if we can quit, being jerks to people and try to cut people off that, might need this as income. Now, I'm of the opinion, I'm sure our current administration won't like me saying this, but if you're filthy rich and got gabillions of dollars, you should be paying your fair share of taxes. And I don't believe in trickle-down economics, because it never trickles down. The rich just get richer, the poor just get poorer. That's how that works. So, that is BS, in my opinion. So, if we can get back to managing it so that everybody pays in equally, then I think there wouldn't be any problems, affording this. So, a related problem is the need for appropriate living arrangements. So, again, what are the living arrangements going to be? If they're fine by themselves, if they're still mentally and physically capable of taking care of themselves, that's fine. Like I say, you might want to go visit them every now and then and check on them and, talk to them on the phone, make sure everything's cool. And, if there comes a time when that's not okay anymore, then you have to decide. Like I say, mother-in-law is now in that position where she got advancing dementia, she can't think right, and she can't stay on her feet, she falls. So, she needed someone with her 24/7. She doesn't have that kind of money where we could afford, because we looked into it, afford someone to live with her, a nurse, for 24/7. So now she's in assisted living. She's not happy about that. It's at about what she makes a month. So, it's not cheap. They show those things on TV all the time. Don't go broke in a nursing home. Well, some folks, can't help that. So, I know my grandmother, had to be on a Medicaid bed, and they had to, divvy up everything, and, she was on Medicaid. So, it's just, whatever the situation is, how it works out, that's what you're going to need to deal with. And care for older people who can no longer manage on their own. And some people can't. Like I said, we're at that time now with my mother-in-law, and she just can't, She, like I said, confuses people who they are. She confuses how people are related. She, has the same conversation with you 3 and 4 times a day within an hour space, and just doesn't remember that she said that. And, she can't go, like I said, 20 feet or so without falling down. And that got to be a problem at her house with, her pushing the button, and then they're like, we're not doing this anymore. You guys have got to have somebody here 24/7, or she's got to go somewhere. That's not our job. We have other things to do than come here 3 and 4 times a week. And they were kind of, jerky and nice about it, because they said, we know that her wishes are to stay in her home, and we know that what you're all trying to do for her is to keep her, but we're telling you that time's over. So we had to adjust to that. So, that's where I'm going to leave you for today. And that's something to think about, the lifestyle and social issues related to aging. So I hope that helped you figure out a little bit more about why you do what you do. Please like and share this educational program so we can spread it around the world. If you want to help me out, subscribe to my YouTube channel. If you want to help me out even more, go to my Patreon page and become a patron. Thanks for watching. That's all for now. Until next time.